It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Max Kopfstein. Max Mordechai, you were born in Germany?
Born in Germany, in Berlin, in 1925.
Okay, and you grew up in a religious family?
I grew up in a religious family, a very solid family, well respected, very well known. My great-grandfather, who I just discovered a lot of writings from him in the National Library here, and my grandfather were all Rabbanim. My father himself was a Gabbai all his life and very much connected to the community, and we had a religious home, and I went to a religious school, and a very nice and warm and happy family.
What was the community that your parents were involved with? What was the name of the community in Berlin?
Berlin, according to the name of the street in Berlin, called Münchener Straße, in the Bavarian quarter Schöneberg, that's sort of West Berlin. And that school was built in 1910, but my father must have joined there about 1920, after the war, something like that. And he was a member of all his time, of Chazan Sheni, and very, very active in shul, so much so that he got a Chover title, Chover title, for his on his wedding day. And my mother writes to me in England, I think he was happier with the Chover title than with me. But that's only a story. Okay.
So then your family's many generations in Germany?
Some of them. No, half, I would say. My grandfather was born in Hungary, a big family. Also Kopfstein, and they used to spell his name Kuf, Aleph, Vav, Pei, Shin, Tut, Shin, Tet, Yud, Nun. Kopfstein, but Kopfstein. I abbreviated it in Israel, otherwise nobody would know what it was due to Kopfstein, one Pei.
And what is the actual meaning of the...
of what?
A Kopfstein?
Headstone.
Headstone.
And that's probably an ancestor named after his profession, or the upper stone in a cemetery. I don't know. I have no idea.
And Max, did you have siblings?
No.
You were the only child?
Only child. I had an elder brother and a younger sister who both died as infants, but for all practical purposes, I'm the only child. I'm the sandwich, but I'm an only child.
And you remember, obviously, growing up in Berlin?
Sure. I was 13 and a half when I left, or nearly long after my bar mitzvah still. Super duper bar mitzvah.
So, can I ask, growing up, you were in a Jewish day school?
In a Jewish, not state school, a Jewish school, Adas Yisroel. There were 12 Jewish schools in Berlin, and one of them was religious, more Aguda affiliated. And a good school, a high school, a gymnasium, lyceum, grammar school, until the 8th grade of schooling. And then I came to England at the age of 13 and a half, via Kindertransport.
Okay, so I'd like to ask, before we get into the amazing story with the Kindertransport, did you experience any anti-Semitism growing up as a...
Yes and no, of course I did, but it didn't really... I knew that there was a lot of trouble going on, and the Jewish community degenerated, and because of all the commandments and laws forbidding Jews to do this, that, and the other, from 1933, from the event of Hitler. When Hitler came to power in 1933, I was 8.
Do you remember?
Yes, sure. I was 8.
And you remember there were rallies, or do you remember the...
Of course.
The atmosphere in Berlin at the time?
Of course I remember the atmosphere. But
was it frightening? Was it
Yes, it was. But my own personal experience was that I was completely surrounded by Jews in any way. School, friends, kehillah, shops even. I had nothing much to do with them. And I had a very warm family. And thus I had a very, very lovely childhood, which I've never forgotten. Which is very, very important for me because of that. Because my parents knew intelligently how to deal with me under those circumstances. my father was well known in our area. When it was my bar mitzvah, of course I got a talit and then tefillin, and then he taught me how to do tzitziot, how to knot them, and everything else. And I lined the whole parasha, and then there was an evening party, black tie.
Sure.
It's May 1938.
38 when you were 13.
When I was 13. May 1938. I even got a bicycle, which was then the vogue.
And did you wear a yarmulke outside the house?
Outside the house, no. Not in Berlin. My father also not. He worked for a firm which was half Jewish and half Goy, but from the age of 15. He'd always he was a German soldier in the First World War, fought France on the Western Front of Germany, and got married quite late. He was 36 when he got married. And he, at work, he would not wear a yarmulke and a kippah. At home, yes. At home, yes, but not at work. It was very common in those days, also in England.
And can I ask, when you were walking in Berlin, did you ever have
personal
no,
but for instance, the Germans issued, the Nazi Party issued a daily or a weekly newspaper called Der Stürmer, completely anti-Semitic. I saw those pinned up on the notice boards of Berlin, of course. I saw all that, and I heard people talking, but personally I was never assaulted, and that I did not personally experience. But that's a matter of luck, maybe. I don't know.
And Kristallnacht, you remember Kristallnacht?
That was a particular. I'll give you a preamble to that. My parents were Zionists, religious Zionists, but I don't think my father was very active in Zionist politics or anything like that. But during the Olympic Games, 36, anti-Semitism died down a bit because of so many foreign visitors. Then afterwards it flared up again. In 36 or 37, my father took me with him to Prague for 4 days to find out, with some relatives there, whether perhaps it was time to leave and so on. He came back with nothing changed. He had a very good position in his firm. He even went with my parents went to Palestine in 37, stayed here for about a month, to find out how it's going, and came back. I don't know whether of the opinion that it can't get worse, it'll pass, which many people thought still at the time. But the Yekis here had a lot of trouble. There were lots of disturbances here, 36, 39.
Did you go with your parents?
No, I stayed in Berlin. I was 12. I stayed in Berlin with friends.
Oh, so they went for the month and you stayed?
Yeah, that's right. And they came back and nothing changed. Nothing changed. People, of course, were leaving slowly and slowly. There were about 600,000 Jews in Germany in 33. By the time war broke out, about half of them had managed to escape one way or another. Kristallnacht was a result, I'm not going to go too much into history, of lots of trouble with the Polish government. And one of the sons of one of the parents who was very much affected shot a German diplomat in Paris, and that caused the planned pogrom in Berlin. My father came back from shul early that morning. He used to go to shul every day, and said, you're not going to school today? The synagogues in Berlin are burning. This is the 10th of November, 38. And I didn't go to school. I didn't go to school. He says, look, if the Gestapo come and look for me, phone me. There's a phone we had a phone at home, but you won't be able to run to the phone at the end of the street, public phone, and phone me. Here is our slogan, you have guests, and I'll try and go and hide. I came back, and at 10 o'clock the Gestapo appeared, two Gestapo policemen in civis. Where's your husband? My mother and I, where's your husband? At work. Phone him, tell him to come back home immediately. Which she did. My mother did this, and I ran through the back stairs to the public phone, gave him the slogan, and my father left work and went into hiding. Hiding meaning Opposite our shul, there was some acquaintances, a lady of 90 and her daughter, a spinster of 60. He went to them because they wouldn't look for him there. No men there, nothing. I come back and the Gestapo is not at home anymore. I said, what happened? He says, well, they were here, they were waiting, and they asked me, how old is your husband? And he was 53 at the time. But my mother somehow or other said, and abbreviated the 1885, the name is 85. Oh, so old? Bye-bye. And they left because they were supposed to bring people under the age of 60. German. So, but he was in hiding for 10 days. Quite a few other people that I know as well, uncle and friends. And then that was the event which changed German Jewry's attitude to what was happening. Then everybody wanted to get out. But you couldn't, because all the countries, all the potential countries, had immigration quotas, and you had to wait. And then the British came up immediately with the idea of willing to accept a number of unaccompanied children, provided that in England somebody puts down £50 and is willing to accept the child and look after him. That was the condition. And you must come unaccompanied. That was the German condition.
The German condition?
They agreed to it. The Germans agreed to let children go if they had somewhere to go to. The policy of the Nazis was Juden raus, Yehudim achutza, get out. That was until 1941. Until 1941, that was their policy. Juden, get out of Germany. Get out of Germany. Find yourself anywhere you want.
So, Max, can I just ask you,
yeah.
That Kristallnacht, do you remember seeing your synagogue being burned?
Our synagogue was one of the few that were not burned. I didn't see any others, for the simple reason that it was in a compound of houses.
And then it would have spread to the adjacent housing complexes.
Exactly. It became afterwards one of the there were about 4 or 5 synagogues in Berlin that were not burned. And it became the haven for any Jews. For instance, Yom Kippur, I'll tell you about that in a minute. There were 2 services, from 9 to 11 and 11 to 1. You had with Gestapo agents in the audience, in the worshippers, amongst the worshippers, because there wasn't anywhere else to go. So you had to limit yourself. Then at the time, sometime later, why am I telling you this? Because when I came to England, my parents wrote to me nearly every day. Nearly every day. I was there, I had over 200 letters from my parents, which until the 1st of September, until the war broke out, was very regular. Afterwards they sent these letters via the United States until the end of 41, when the United States came into the war, Pearl Harbor. Then I didn't hear anymore. I know what's happened afterwards. That over the years I found out. So I knew what was going on to some extent, because my parents did not tell me what all the humiliations and laws and so on, but you could read between the lines. But you could also read not between the lines how they managed during that time, which is amazing. Not only for my parents, for some of the Jews. My mother writes to me in the end of 1940, today I'm going for a perm at the hairdresser. Yeah. Right? Jewish cultural activities. Jews were not allowed anymore to mix with Goyim and their own kind. They had a concert, Eliyahu Shel Handel. My mother was a good singer. She participated. He writes to me about it. My father was dismissed after Kristallnacht, immediately after Kristallnacht, because then they Aryanized all Jewish firms or semi-Jewish firms, after having been in that firm for 38 years consecutively, from the age of 15 throughout the First World War, all the time the same firm.
What type of firm was it?
Pardon?
What type of firm was it?
Iron ore and coal, in Upper Silesia, on the border of Poland. And that's why my grandfather was the Rav in Beuthen, which today is Bitom. but his grave is intact, in perfect order. We visited it about 20 years ago. I went there.
So how did your parents survive if they weren't?
Well, and my father then became, because he was well known, became part of the Jewish organization that was still running for the sake of the Jews, look after education. But then, because he was very much concerned with finances and bookkeeping, he became, as far as I can make out, he had to travel to all Jewish communities in Germany to check their books and report what he found. Whom to report to, I don't know. Either to the Jewish community headquarters or to the Gestapo, I have no idea. My parents were deported in October 42. I also got occasional Red Cross letters. Do you know what that is?
Sure.
Yeah, from them. And the only person who survived and was present when that was an aunt of mine, which is another story, quite a long story. My father's brother opted out. He became not religious, and he married a Gioret, a convert. And because she had Christian ancestry, they didn't do anything with her. My uncle, her husband, was a judge. He was dismissed in 1933 on the spot and couldn't find work, so he started working for Recha Freia's Youth Aliyah organization. And he went once or twice and accompanied transports to Palestine and had to come back, of course. And in 1940, May 40, about 1940, some 300 or 400 Jews made illegal Aliyah. It was still the policy of the Germans, Juden raus, Judim achutza. And they made an illegal immigration, or left illegally via the Danube ships. When they arrived at Haifa, because of the British mandate, the white paper, exactly, they arrested them and put them on ships to deport them to Mauritius. One of the ships was called Patria, and at the Haganah at the time wanted to stop that ship from sailing, so they attached a small explosive to the ship, just wanting to disable the engine. But the ship was in such a bad state of repair that it sunk immediately, and 200 people drowned in Haifa port. And my uncle was amongst them. So he was just another one of the korbanot of the people who were very much affected.
Sacrifices.
Yeah. But this aunt survived. She survived the war. She stayed in Berlin because she was German, and she went back to be a Christian. And that's why. Why did she have to stay there altogether? Because my cousin, her eldest daughter, had contracted polio, was in a wheelchair, and she couldn't be taken anywhere. So my uncle divorced his wife, divorced her, for the purpose that she should be able to survive.
Wow.
And she and this girl, this cousin of mine, stayed in Berlin. And one day, this is my aunt told me after the war, because I met her after the war. One day somebody looked at her, she says, but this girl is a Jew. So she realized that she had to do something about it. So she dispatched her daughter to a monastery, and nothing more was heard of her. The Russians either conquered the place or she died. Nobody knows.
You lost contact.
Exactly. So the only survivor of my family, the only entire survivor, was a cousin of mine who got to Berlin, their son, to Palestine, Sarah Bassan. He died about 2 years ago here. He was a professor of philology at Haifa University. And this aunt. And this aunt I found after the war. We made contact again, and she told me what happened to my parents. In October 1940, Himmler, the Gestapo head, was not satisfied with the slow departure of German Jews. By that time, they'd already made up their mind, Jews to be murdered. And he put somebody else in charge in Berlin. And my mother worked from the beginning of the war in the Jewish hospital. She had no experience of nursing, But that was one of the places where you are likely to be safer, because the Germans were interested in keeping the hospital going to prevent diseases from being transferred to Germans and so on and so forth. She became a massage nurse. Your staff is too big. We want a list of 100 people by tomorrow morning for deportation. And my mother, because of a minor position there, was included. My father was not. My father went voluntarily. And my aunt helped them pack the little case they took. And that's all we knew. No, I knew nothing. After the war, I found out that this from the Red Cross, about a year after the war had ended, this transport, number 22nd Ost Transport, East Transport, to the east, destination unknown. So I presumed, looking at the list of all the transport, that it was Auschwitz. My family and I, we lost a son here. We lost a son in the Mifta Litani 40 years ago. But my other son and my daughter, my wife, went to Germany, Shorashim, roots visit. So we went to Auschwitz. Later on I found out, which is another big story, that they weren't taken to Auschwitz, they were taken to Riga.
To Riga?
To Riga. And that's where they found their end. In October 42, no survivors of that transport. Usually there were 1 or 2 survivors. There were 700 or 800 people on that transport. No one survived. My father went voluntarily.
Do you think in Riga they went to Rumbela? Rumbela was one of the, in the forest. Rumbela, it's part of Riga.
Yes. There's a
train that goes right to Rumbela, and
right.
they had the mess.
But as far as I know, they were shot into pits. I don't really know.
I think it's in Rumbela.
Yeah, maybe. How do I know? How do I know? How did it come about that I know it was Riga? At the beginning of the war, for 39, half of German Jewry, half of Berlin's Jewry also, had more or less managed. There was a famous Rav, I don't know whether you've heard of him, Josef Zvi Karlebach.
Yes, sure.
Okay? He was an educator, he was a Rav in Hamburg, and he was the last Orthodox rabbi in Germany. He became the sort of main rabbi, but he lived in Hamburg. But Hamburg's community also dwindled. What Jews there were tried to get to Berlin. And he came to Berlin one day, and my mother writes to me, this is after the war via the United States, she writes, today we have Dr. Rabbi Karlbach coming. I listened to his sermon. I wasn't all that impressed, whatever. She writes also the content of his speech, what he was talking about. Says he's coming again for Pesach, because under the circumstances he's telling us what to do, how to deal with Pesach, with very limited resources, matzot, and so on and so forth, chametz. And then he had nowhere to stay, so he stayed in our house.
Wow.
He and some of his managed to get away, big family, some of them not. And he was deported to Riga. Finish the story. One of his daughters managed to get to England beforehand. And she knew where her father was, Rabbi Karlbach, was buried. And about 15 years ago, they went to a memorial meeting in Riga, in the forest, 50 to 60 years after it happened, and found there a list of German Jews who had been deported to that place, include my name of my parents. Their son, her son, Zvi Karlbach's grandson, married my daughter.
Wow, what a small world. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's right. There are all sorts of stories.
And they live here in Israel?
Yes. Yes. We have 7 grandchildren, 4 are not far too young yet, and three daughters from her. We have 14 great-grandchildren at the moment.
Yeah.
So that's the story.
And
Close the gap.
can I ask, have you been to Riga?
I've not been to Riga.
Would you ever want to go?
Not anymore. I
would be
wouldn't. I
difficult.
don't think. I think it's too much for me. No, I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could do it. I often wanted to go to
It's
Riga.
very hard. I was there 3
Yeah.
years ago.
Uh-huh.
It's in the forest, and
I have pictures of the place, but
there was also deportations from Stuttgart,
that's right.
and they've got the lists
That's right.
where they went, and they went to Riga.
That's right. That's
I
how
think the
also,
very first deportation from Stuttgart, one of the very first deportations, went straight to Riga.
I know, because a friend of mine's father from Stuttgart was taken there, and his son visited and brought me back some earth from there, so that I have it for due burial when I go there.
In many, many years to come. And may best friend. Max, can I ask you? Wow,
Yeah.
this is really very, very. It's exceptionally. I know it's difficult.
Ordinary story of the times. It's not
It's not.
exceptional.
When your parents heard that there was a way, I mean, after Kristallnacht, as you said, it was the defining moment. That changed everything.
Of course.
I think
of
people
course.
really realized that
They tried everything to
things
go-
are not going to get better. It's just
Exactly.
going to deteriorate.
Exactly. No, not only that, they tried. You went to a consulate, you went to Palestine offices, you went to to get an affidavit, to get a permit, to get a certificate, whatever you could, anywhere.
Everything was closed,
Not close. You got a number.
and you had to wait.
You had to wait. And my number, I remember, for instance, a letter where my mother says, I got number 25,000, da da da. And then a week later, somebody else had gotten, no, and a week before, somebody had got the number 15,000. So you can imagine the amount of
God.
applications there were. Enormous to get out. But the quota was much, much smaller.
And what's so sad is
My parents, my father retrained for possible different occupation. He was in charge of manpower and organization in that firm. It's a fairly big firm. And but he went to train for fish smoking and for carpentry, and the furniture was compacted to make smaller furniture, and they sent items to me to England. I only had this what I came with to England, but some weeks later they sent me 2 big trunks with lots of my things for a boy who has to grow. Lots of clothing which are larger than my number at the time for the next 2 or 3 years, and some of their things, including a little bit of their silver, which is in that cupboard there. And this accordion came to me also in that sort of way. That's why it's mentioned here. And then they got a permit to come to England on the 15th of August, 39. And then the bureaucracy and the tickets and all that, in a fortnight you couldn't manage. Fortnight later there was war on, that was the end of that. They were trapped.
So can I ask you, Max, when they made the decision that England is accepting unaccompanied children,
Yeah.
it must have been very difficult for your parents to decide to send you by
Sure.
yourself.
Sure.
It's
Only son. Only son.
the hardest decision in their lives.
Yeah. But 10,000 children came to England in the period from Kristallnacht to the outbreak of war. The same decision for all the 10,000 parents.
Did they ask your opinion, or did they consult you?
No. Of course they told me. I was too young.
You were only
13
bar
and a
mitzvah,
half. Yes.
And how did you feel when they told you that
No,
this
I
is an
took it
option?
very seriously, but the idea was there was some hope. There was hope that we would be
And then they
reunited.
could join, they could
Yes.
reunite, yeah.
It wasn't yet extermination. It was Juden raus. So somewhere outside of Germany, we will meet up again. We'll soon meet, please God, in America, in Eretz Israel, in wherever,
Yeah.
in England, wherever, Shanghai, no, who knows?
And Max, you showed me there was a list that was given. Could you read out part of the list, what you were allowed to bring?
Yes, okay. This is the list that my father had to present to the German authorities on the day that I left Berlin. The contents of my rucksack, That's all I had. Other people had a very small valise, very small case. I had a rucksack. Pair of slippers, pajamas, toilet bag, handkerchiefs, shoehorn, children's camera, language guide, pillow for journey, ski jacket, towel, soap, small dictionaries, torch, siddur, pair of ear protectors, 2 rolls of film, a bag with food, drinking glass in container, 1 notebook, tefillin in bag. Clothed. Undergarment, woolen vest, underpants, socks, ski socks, pullover, overcoat, scarf, beret, pair of gloves, 2 handkerchiefs, a sports belt. Inside the pockets, 1 key bag, 1 fountain pen, 2 refill pencils, 1 wallet, 1 purse. Signed, Israel Walter Kopfstein as father.
So they added the Israel to all Jewish men.
And to my name too.
And to your name. And Max, can you relate what happened on leading up to your departure?
On the day itself.
Or even before? I mean, you must have had to go to all your relatives.
Yeah,
and
right. I was taken to all my relatives in Berlin to say goodbye, and we'll see you soon again, and we'll reunite again, and be strong, and everything will be fine. Serious, very serious.
But you really felt that you would be seeing again, you would be reunited.
Yes, of
that
course.
This was something very temporary.
Right. And the Altmann family, he was the Rav of our shul in Berlin, who had managed to get to England. This created a special job for him in Manchester. 2 months before Kristallnacht. He was my Rav at the Bar Mitzvah. I have a speech in German from my Bar Mitzvah. Very good to me. And they were the ones who were willing to accept me. So when Kindertransport started, they agreed.
Did they put the deposit?
I've only found out 2 months ago that it was not they who paid the deposit, but some aunt who was in better position, some aunt of my mother's in England. She deposited the money, but they were able to take me in their home. He was a Rav, very well-known Rav in Berlin, also of the Beit Din in Berlin, Dr. Altmann. He had 2 little children, a girl of 4 and a boy of 2 at the time when they came to England. The day I left, it was a Thursday, the 2nd of February '39. My father took me, only my father, took me in a taxi to the station where we had to assemble. The Nazis allowed only 1 parent to accompany their child. And there we said goodbye. And
you remember saying goodbye to your mother before at home?
Of course, but wait. There were about 170 children on that train. We got onto the train, but the train stopped again at another station in Berlin on its way out. And on the platform there stood my aunt and my mother, and I took leave of him through the window of the carriage.
and you remember? I mean, these are
very well.
These are memories that will be
very, very well. And we were 8 boys in that compartment, simple compartment, and we were pretty tight and nervous and very quiet. We came to the Dutch border after a few hours, a train journey, and the train stopped before the Dutch border, and the German officials came on, the customs and whatever, maybe also the police, I don't remember exactly. And then the train moved to the other side of the border, and on the platform there stood Jewish Dutch women with goodies, with sweets and so on. We were happy. Oh, free! Now we are free. We are free. And that was that. That was very nice. We went to Hoek van Holland. We came in the evening. We boarded the ferry, overnight ferry. In the morning we found ourselves in Harwich. That's in southern England. Train to London, and this aunt of my mother's who had paid the money received me there. All sorts of people were. Some of the children went to hostels. Some organization guaranteed for them. There were also 1 or 2 children who had nobody. That's nothing to do with me personally, but there's some horrendous stories there. And I stayed in a hostel in London, when the door opened, and it was Friday afternoon, there was the second rabbi of our school, of our shul in Berlin, by chance, who was the manager of that hostel. So I was there. And the Sunday, I took the train on my own with another boy, I think, to Manchester, and the family of this Rav who got me received me, and I could speak German to them, and I knew them personally. That was nice. I had a soft landing. Not everybody had a soft landing.
Did you know any English at this time?
Hardly. No, nothing. I knew French quite well, but not German.
Not English?
Of schooling, but not English. Correct. I had 4 years of French, so I knew quite well, but I only had a year or so of English. I didn't know well. So
and you went by yourself on the train with a friend to Manchester?
You take a ticket and it says Manchester, you get off.
And who came to fetch you at the station?
The Altman, the people who had brought me over, Rabbi Altman's wife, Mrs. Altman, and who really became my second mother, my foster mother.
And you stayed in their home?
And they did not yet have room for me in their home because they themselves had only just arrived in England. And so I was put up in a hostel which I didn't like. That's also another story. The hostel director was also a refugee, and his daughter would in due course be my sister-in-law.
Wow, what a small world.
He's the wife of the Rav in Zurich. Anyhow, I stayed there for about a few days, and this Mrs. Altman, my foster mother, realized I wasn't very happy there, so I was put up with an English family, religious English family.
Jewish
and English family.
In Manchester?
In Manchester, quite well off. And I went to school. I didn't understand a word. At the beginning, they put me into how to go to school. The age limit was 14. I wasn't yet 14.
Was this a Jewish school that you...
No.
A non-Jewish
There were no Jewish schools in Manchester at the time. At that time, there weren't any. An ordinary school. Ordinary school for boys. High school for boys.
Just out of interest, how did your classmates, or how did the non-Jewish kids...
I don't know. There was one teacher who spoke German. One teacher. So a little bit I was able to... And having to speak English, because I was in an English school, in an English household, shopping and everything. I learned English very, very quickly. In 3 months I knew English.
Wow. How were your classmates? Were they very friendly towards you? Or did they ask you about...
Well, I wouldn't know, because they didn't have much... I couldn't understand them at the beginning. After 2 or 3 months, after 2 months, yes. So I made friends. Yes, definitely.
And this was Jewish and non-Jewish?
Yes. There were very few Jewish boys, mostly non-Jewish boys. But then we were evacuated when it came to the beginning of the war. By that time I was 14 already. The 4 Jewish boys in our school were evacuated away from Manchester, out of the bombing range. And we had a billet, beautiful billet in that small town. And 4 Jewish boys. I was the eldest. I was 14, another 14, and the 2 others were 13. Of course, we spoke English. No trouble at that time anymore. And one day, after about a week or 2, we found out we were supposed to have vegetarian food. And she was using trait fromage. So we can't have that, please. And they said, okay, we'll have it sent from our families, this rabbi, kosher march. Fine. Of course, so much.
This is margarine?
Margarine, yes. Fortunately, after about a week, we found that the lady, the housekeeper there, had stacked the kosher marge in the pantry and was still giving us this. Said, we can't have that, we're leaving. 14-year-old boys. We went to school and told them we were leaving, and we told our host we were leaving, and he gave us a dressing down. What do you think you are doing? You are refugees, we've accepted you, and it's wartime, and you think you can eat what you want? We were trembling, traumatic, but we left. Went back to Manchester. Then, there was no schooling, and in the afternoons I used to go to the yeshiva in Manchester Yeshiva, which I did not like, very dim and dull. They spoke Yiddish. I didn't know Yiddish. Didn't like it.
Even from the German, you couldn't understand a bit of Yiddish?
Yes, but they learned Gemara in a different way. We had Gemara, Mishnayot. We didn't have Gemara in school. I hadn't learned Gemara yet at that time. The atmosphere was not what I was used to.
Wasn't Hamisha? It wasn't...
No. It was undisciplined, it was dirty, it was dull, it was strange, terribly strange to me. And I only landed there because the cheder in that shul, in the district shul, was too easy for me. I knew too much for them, so I put me into yeshiva, and they didn't like it. Anyhow, there's no more. Then there was a trouble in the family, the Altman family, because Mrs. Altman had a traumatic postnatal breakdown. So everything was topsy-turvy. So what does one do with me? You have to go to work. I was 14. There was no more education law. You were able to work. Wartime. Didn't like that. But outside Manchester, there was a hachshara from Bachad. Do you know what Bachad is? Brit Chalutzim Datiyim is the Chalutzik part of Bnei Akiva.
Okay. To prepare for...
And I found there two boys, some older than I am, who I knew from school from Berlin. So I felt at home with them. I also was in Bnei Akiva, which is, in England was Bnei Akiva, in Germany it was called Brit Hanoah Adati. So I liked that. They said, what about you going on Hachshara? And I did. At the age of 15, I went on Hachshara, and I remained on Hachshara for the next 15 years, living a kibbutz life in England, and then became an aliyah to kibbutz Lavi. So I was a kibbutznik for 16 years, 15 in England and 1 in Lavi.
So I think Yehuda Avner was also
very
part of the...
Very good friend of mine.
He was from Manchester as well?
Sure, I knew him from then.
And you were on the same Hachshara with Yehuda Avner?
Yes, for a time later on. He wasn't on Hachshara very much, yes. Yes, but we've been friends ever since. I go and see his wife very often.
Mimi?
Yeah, sure.
And the brother-in-law, Yehuda's brother-in-law is here in the same...
Asher.
Yeah, Asher
of course.
Also from
yes, I've known Gubi Adun since 1944 or 5, something like that. And Asher, 48, since 1948. So we're always very good friends, and the children were very good friends.
That was a very good decision to go on the Hachshara. I think that was...
Yes. For me, a very, very important period in my life.
It was in a way like a substitute family. It was...
of course, but you don't... Look, first of all, I was together at the beginning. 99% of the people in Hachsharot then were refugees from Germany. Slowly, English boys and girls came to join. And Aliyah, there was no Aliyah until the beginning of the state because of the white paper. So the Hachsharot grew and grew and grew. And I became the manager of our main Hachshara in 1950. And I was asked to stay on for another 5 years, which I did, and I met my wife there, we got married there. Our daughter was born there, then we left for Lavi, 55.
And Max, can I ask you, you mentioned that your parents would write to you every day.
Yes.
Do you still have the letters?
All of them. All of them, and I gave them about 4 or 5 years ago to Yad Vashem, but I have a photocopy in my files, in the computer, of every letter.
Would they put it into a book? It must be...
I've written a book about my parents' letters, but a long time ago, about 30 or 25 years ago. And I took excerpts from, didn't translate literally, how are you, what are you wearing, that sort of thing, I left out. I don't know whether I've got an extra copy. You can certainly lend it to you, but you have to give it back to me. They're translated into English at the moment, and the original copy, the original letters are Yad Vashem, and I have a photocopy of every letter, over 200 letters.
So those letters were a lifeline. That was your connection.
Yes, yes, right.
Were you ever able to speak on the phone?
Twice. And I came to England in February. In April for my birthday, my parents phoned me. And then a couple of months later they phoned me again. Big deal. You had to order the phone call and be there on time to make the phone call.
But you hear their voice must have been very emotional.
Yeah, right. For them and for me. Sure.
It makes when you realize months were passing and the situation in Germany was deteriorating with the war.
Yeah, of course.
Did it dawn on you, unfortunately,
we didn't know exactly anywhere in the world. Nobody knew exactly what was going on at the moment war broke out.
Yeah.
The first rumors of extermination and on the very harsh conditions came sometime in 1942. Some people managed to escape and came to the States, I think, and managed to tell their story. They wouldn't believe them at first. American jury wouldn't believe them, but slowly they began to sicker through that what was going on. That was in 1942.
And when did you become aware of it? Or
after the war.
Only after the war?
Properly after the war. We were looking, everybody was looking strenuously what happened to my relatives. Red Cross and so on. So you look all over the place. I've just got now, because there was an organization in London, World Jewish Relief Unit, I think it's called, and they opened their files about 6-7 months ago. And I asked them, do they have any information on my parents? They sent me a few documentation. That's why I know. Yeah, that's why I know also that this particular aunt of my mother's paid for me.
Wow.
I didn't know until just now. And this, I have letters in there from this aunt of mine writing to all sorts of people. Can you tell me what happened to? Including my parents, of course. And that's it. That's what I know.
And Max, you showed me a picture. Your parents sent you accordion? If you could
this is a funny story.
If you could just show for our viewers.
The story about my accordion. When I was 12, I was given an accordion for my birthday, 1937. Lovely. I was musical. I had 2 or 3 lessons, not many more. But when I came to England, it was left behind in Berlin. But some friends of my parents traveled got affidavit to the States via England. And this is sometime before the war. And they brought me the accordion. Okay. When I came on Hachshara, I used the accordion, and it was the life and soul of anything that was going on. But it's a small accordion, and I had it later when we left the kibbutz, when we had outings with Yom Ha'atzmaut or family. That was the life and soul of any party. It became pretty derelict over the years. It's a small place. And sometime back, I couldn't use it anymore, so I chucked it away. And I bought myself another accordion. Bigger one. Okay. Somebody came to interview me like you did from Nir Galim. Do you know what Nir Galim is?
Sure, very much.
And I told him a story, and he says, why did you do that? These things are important as a relic. It's something. That's what I did. And this person gave a lecture here somewhere or other. My daughter was present. And he says, no. My father threw the accordion away, but my brother, my younger son, took it away and kept it. And that was. So it came back to me, and we decided to give the accordion to Nir Galim. It's an exhibit there. And that's what this story is about.
So your accordion is in Nir Galim?
Yeah.
Nir Galim, for our listeners, is near Ashdod. It's a Holocaust... It's a moshav where a lot of Hungarian Jews settled,
and they
have a very, very special museum.
Correct.
It's B'nai Kiva orientated moshav.
Right. Yeah.
There's Dugo that I've met, and Zahava.
They ask them, they'll show you the accordion.
And they have little miniature synagogues that were from Hungary. And your accordion's in Nir Gadim, so I saw it. I was there. I was in Nir
that's
Gadim.
it.
What a small world. Wow, to think of. So your son actually, they actually saw that you had thrown it away and they kept it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's it. That's the story.
And Max, can I ask you, coming to you like a profession, you went in Hachshara, and then did you learn a profession or what
Well,
did
on
you do?
Hachshara, obviously at the time, we were chalutzim.
It's pioneers.
Pioneers. And the idea, my interpretation, not only mine, the movements, the Brit Chalutzim Datiyim, which is the equivalent to kibbutz hadati in this country.
The religious kibbutz movement.
Religious kibbutz, to create a new society, a Zionist society, a religious society, and to the emphasis on agriculture, because that was the important thing, to have a root in the country, on the land, and to do your work for yourself, and to be a chalutz, and not to rely on other people.
To cultivate the land.
Everything. Not only that,
to have the connection
also
to
to
the country.
create a better society, and so on. So the idealists up to here. And I was very much part of that. Very much part of that. At the time, the hachsharot in England were houses that had been leased or from farmers whose employees had been conscripted. They were looking for people to work for them, and we were not conscripted. We were refugees. We were aliens, friendly aliens. That was the title. So we worked for farmers all day long, and in the evening we came back to the Hachshara, and we had our tarbut and our functions and our education, which was non-existent. And the movement came to the conclusion that you have to have one place which is our own, and we'll manage it our own. And in 1944, Bachal in England bought a farm with the help of some more prosperous Jews in England, in a village called Thaxted in Essex, about 100 kilometers from London. A big farm, and we ran the farm. And we were divided into the staff of the farm, which were the older people. I was by that time 19, 20, 21, 22. And the younger ones, 15 to 18, 19, who would work half a day and half a day education. And I came to that farm and I worked on the farm, tractor driver, all sorts of things. Eventually we realized that we didn't have enough scientific knowledge to run a modern farm, because it was a commercial farm. So I was allowed to go to Glasgow University for a 6 months manager's course, which my relatives paid for me, not I, because we didn't have the money to do it. Nobody had any money. No money. Didn't exist. We had no money. And I came back and I became number 2. When my predecessor, a very capable fellow called Akiva Landau, Kuli Landau, married, went to Lavi, came to Aliyah, I took over from him, and I became the manager. And when the state was created in 1950, he went on Aliyah, and up to 1948, Hachsharot in England grew and grew and grew. There were about 10 Hachsharot at any one time. The Thaxted, this one being the main one, because we could do what we wanted. Pigishot, annual Pigishot of Ner Kiva were in Thaxted. Summer camps were in Thaxted. Education, we were able to do, we were free, we weren't dependent on employers. So I became the manager, and eventually I married, and then somebody came and took over from me, and we came to Lavi in 55.
And how long were you on Kibbutz Lavi?
A year. Because my wife doesn't really like kibbutz, and I by that time I overstayed my time in England. It was too much. I lived a communal life. All the time people were getting younger. My older Chaverim had established Lavi. I was part of the crowd that should have established Lavi in 49, but I was asked to stay on. So it didn't appeal to me anymore. I wanted a more family-orientated life. I also didn't want people to tell you what you have to do. Yeah. So after about a year we left. And then I went and joined Misrat HaChatlaut, because I had agricultural experience. The Soil Conservation Department, which was a department very much influenced by American experience in Tennessee Valley Authority. Professor Loudermilk and worked there, and I had an opportunity to go to college. Had 3 years of university in Haifa University. I learned geography and political science, and carried on with Chaklud until I retired. Various jobs, not only soil conservation, later on ecology, agricultural ecology.
And Max, can I ask you, through the years, have you been involved with reunions or meeting other Kindertransport?
Yeah, there are not many. I personally didn't take Kindertransport seriously until a few years ago. For me, it was a matter: get on a train, get up in England, and meet the family I was there. The Kindertransport itself, I didn't realize the very big change that had occurred. Today I realize it, not then. I didn't. It was okay. So now I'm in England. Get on with it.
So Max, I'm going to ask you a question. It's a very controversial, very difficult question. You mentioned that you had a type of soft landing. It wasn't such a soft. I mean, to have left your parents is, in any stretch of the imagination, one of the most traumatic things any child could ever experience in their lifetime.
Okay.
But thank God you had family, or you knew people when you got to the other side.
Yeah.
And you were very welcomed.
Yeah.
And very loved. I'm sure.
Yes.
People knew you.
True.
And you felt familiar environment.
I'm still in touch with my foster sisters. Little children, they were there. 10 years difference between me and them. We're still right.
The connection.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are many stories of Kindertransport that came to England and were not put in Jewish homes. And they say estimate is about a third of all the Kindertransport. The children ended up not being Jewish anymore.
I don't know about the numbers. I have no personal experience. I rely on statistics. I don't really know, but it's true. Certainly some did. And some had personal experience which are horrendous.
Some were put in families where they were abused. They were actually physically abused and mentally abused.
Yes. My Chaterniste, the daughter of Rav Karlebach, who lives, she's still alive. She's a couple of years older than I am. Her brother also managed to get to England. She managed to get to England, her brother. And he was accepted by a Jewish family. And when war broke out, he went to school. He must have been about more or less my age. He went to school, and one day he comes back from school in London and finds a notice on the door: "We have gone to Canada." Doors closed, nothing. That's it. Couldn't get in even. So he roamed the streets. The police picked him up and eventually took him to a Jewish organization that looked after him.
And this was family.
Yes.
His own family.
His. It's not. It's the brother of my Chaterniste. Yes, one of the sons of Rav Karlebach. Shlomo Karlebach lives in New York. Okay. All sorts. There are people here who've had worse experiences. I know some of them.
Do people, because makes you in a position, I mean, have you heard where people, you don't want to accuse, but people have said, why did the Jewish community not accept more of the Kindertransport into their homes? Why did they land up
come on. In society.
It was during the war, and it's not that easy to, in hindsight, it's...
Not everybody is volunteer. People have their own problems, and people are not. Some are not generous. And, what is society all about? It's a very mixture of very many backgrounds and characters, and.
But then when we has to look at the other side, where England at least offered this Kindertransport hope for, and did save over 10,000 children.
England at the time had about 500,000 Jews. America had 6 million Jews. What did the American Jewry do? Next to nothing before the war. Next to nothing.
That's true.
That's it. What did the Evian conference? The Evian conference was something at the end of 1938, if I remember right.
Evian countries like Canada said we don't have, there were countries saying we don't have a Jewish problem and we don't want to have a Jewish problem.
Exactly.
And one Jew is too many.
The Evian conference was called in Europe from many countries, European countries also, America and the Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic.
They were one of the very few that said that they
Exactly. And the other says, no, we have quotas, we can't, we don't want, we can't. That's it. Quotas.
And Max, your wife, where did your wife's...
No, wife, where does she fit in?
where did her family come from, or where was she
Her
born?
parents, her family parents come from Lita, Lithuania. Like South African Jewry. From America. From Lithuania. And her father was a child when he came to England around 1900 something.
So they came before the war?
Before the First World War.
Yeah.
And very frum family. From the Gra, from this brother of the Gra, but there are very many descendants of the brother of Gra. We have a family genealogy. We can trace it back. Actually, I went once to the museum in Lochamer Gitaot, and I found the genealogy of the Gra, another 7 generations back, so I can trace the family up to about 1500.
Wow.
Anyhow, she one of 9 children, very frum family, Litvaks, and they, I cut it very short, they came to Sunderland in England, and then they moved to around. My father-in-law's brother founded a rubber firm in England, in a small place called Petersfield, the town in Petersfield, southern England. And he didn't manage it too well. So he called his brother, my father-in-law, to run the firm. Father, this is 1925 around. Said, okay, but no Shabbat. And therefore, and Sunday is Sunday for the Goyim, big rubber factory. He was the founder of the 5-day week in England because of that.
Really?
So they say. So they say. Anyhow, she grew up in a very religious family.
So she was born in England?
She was born in England. All her siblings were born in England. Yeshiva world. All of them are Yeshiva world. She worked for us, Sarah worked for us in our London office. That's where I met her. And we got friendly, and eventually we got married. But I am the Zionist Chalutz in that family. The rest is all yeshivot and rabbanim and learning, and in Chutz La'aretz everybody worked. But their children here, and it's an enormous tribe by now, very many sit and learn, don't work. Not many, no, that's quite true. But that is the general frame of mind. They were 9, she's one of 9. Today, she and her brother are the only ones left. Her brother lives opposite here, Ben Zion Levi. Do you know him?
I've heard, yeah.
That's my brother-in-law.
Okay.
That's it.
And how many years, Kindertransport, are you married?
How many years were you married? 65.
Hey, that's
60,
wonderful.
66.
That's a big,
66.
That's a big mazel tov. That's wonderful.
3 children. One of them was killed in Mivtza Litani in 1978.
Max, can I ask, when you went your very first time to Germany,
Yes.
did you go because you were...
Why did I go?
Why did you go, and how did you feel going back?
I can tell you.
It must have been a
I
very
can tell you.
conflicting, very difficult
Yeah,
decision.
okay, yeah, that's true. Look, I happened to be... I came to England in 1939. I started working in Misrat al-Chaklut in 1956. And I was interested in a certain venture from work, and I was sent on a course from work to London, and to meet various counterparts and discuss things, professional things in Germany and in Holland. It's to do with water and turning sewage into potable water and the irrigation and that sort of thing. So I found myself in Amsterdam, and I had a Shabbat free, Friday and Shabbat free. Sunday I had to be back in Germany for something or other. So I decided I'd go to Berlin. This is 1975, for the first time, because I was super curious to go back to Berlin. I was just simply very curious.
This is where you grew up.
Yeah. By which time, in 1975, how old was I? 50, 75, 50. And I went to there, and I didn't have to ask one question. I knew my way around, in spite of the bombing, but the street names were the same, and not every house was bombed. And it was a fascinating experience. I was there on my own for 2 days. For Friday afternoon and Shabbat, I actually only walk, couldn't do anything else. But I walked, and how did I walk? And that was the first time. The second time I was there...
Can I just ask, Max,
yeah.
sorry, when you went back, did you go back to your home?
Our home had been bombed. The house...
The house was bombed?
What happened was, immediately when my parents were deported, the last 6-8 months before they were deported, it became a Jewish house. There were no ghettos in Berlin. They concentrated Jews into... So as many Jews as possible into flats, and then it was a Jewish flat, a Jewish apartment. And we had a fairly big flat, about 6 rooms, 5.5 rooms, and every room was occupied by another family, including my aunt and my uncle. And some of them were deported. By the time my parents were deported, there was 2 other ladies still there. As a result of finding my parents in Riga, I got hold of the archives of Germany, and I have a whole file which is from the time they were deported, the declarations they had to sign before they were deported, losing all their property and so on, to the utmost detail.
The exact details.
Curtains, every item of cutlery. Don't ask, I can show it to you. Then the file goes on. They owe 5 minutes to this and 5 marks to this department. It should be transferred to that department, and so on. Fortnight before the war was ended, April 45, this file has now been completely closed. And I have a summary of what happened. Just, can you imagine the German frame of mind? First they get everything, then it has to be done according to law. Everything be according to law. We murder you according to law.
So Max, can I just mention,
Yeah.
We were in Poland, and we saw the list when the trains were departing, and it said, as an example, it would leave at 3:34, not 3:30, but 3:34,
Yes, right.
and it would be arriving at 5:28. To the
Correct.
exact
Yeah.
minute, not
Yeah.
5:30 or...
Nachon.
And then I met a lady in Cape Town who survived Majdanek because she was part of 700 when they only wanted 500, because the numbers weren't correct. So she was sent out of the...
Yeah.
It was a gas chamber, and she survived because of the specific numbers that,
Yeah.
and the
Right. Yeah.
pedantic on the other numbers and on all the details.
Right.
So that saved her life.
Yes, right.
But what you're saying is that to the
That's
every single
awesome.
item was...
Yes, a bit.
Wow, that's amazing.
And then it became German property. They took over the flat, and they gave the flat to a Nazi family, to some officer and his children. And in one of the raids, of British raids on Berlin, that house caught a bomb and then was destroyed.
And what is it today?
It's a block of flats.
A new block
Yeah,
of
but
flats.
opposite there is another house built exactly the same. When we were there with my wife, I took a photograph instead, because it's exactly the same type of house. It stood on the other side of the road. The Kablan at the time
And they replicate.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a shul.
And this is the second time that I went to Berlin together with my wife because the Senate invited us. The third time we went with our children when our Maid of Roots visit. And that's it, 3 times.
And can I ask, the synagogue that you had your bar mitzvah, that's still, is it still a synagogue today?
No, that also a bomb hit it in 1940, towards the end of the war, and they had to destroy it because it was rubble. So there's a school there now, but there is a memorial stone.
And are were any of the shops or any of the school or anything left?
Nothing.
Or it's all destroyed?
The school is Das Yisroel, which was quite a big school. Again, there is a memorial stone there with names, Rabbi Hildesheimer and Munk and whatever.
From monks, from the famous monks in
I think, yeah. I've got it somewhere, this photograph. But the school was also bombed and was a residential building.
And how was your feeling when you walked the streets, or when you saw the?
I didn't have to ask. It was all, what there was. Some of it was new, rebuilt. But I remember a church which was bombed, famous church today in Berlin. They left it in half built. Hello. Here's your patient. I said, here's your patient. I remember the German Nazi band playing music at the corner of that particular place. That I remember. There were shops, 2 shoe shops in Berlin. One was called Leiser and one was called Stiller. I don't think they existed anymore. No. But I didn't have to have that. We went back. We were back in Berlin in '99 and walked around and showed them everything. And of course, I went ice skating there. I went ice skating, and we went for outings. There was a sports arena for Jewish schools in Berlin. I remember sort of things, but not much. Not many things were actually the way that I found them, except for some buildings that had not been destroyed. But all the buildings that were important to me did not exist anymore. The buildings.
And Max,
the school or the shul.
How was your feeling when you saw elderly people in Berlin or in Germany?
Look, I relate to the second generation, that they had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
The first generation, I was very, very careful. On that particular trip, I had to go to another town and have some words with some engineer, and he was more or less a little bit older than I was, We finished off, and I said to him, tell me, at your age, what did you do in the 1930s? Would you excuse me for a minute? And he went out and didn't come back.
Wow. Sure.
That's it.
And he knew you were Jewish?
Of course, I came from Israel. I was there on a professional visit.
And you had a kippah?
No, I didn't wear a kippah. No, I don't think so. No, but that didn't matter.
But he knew that you were from Israel?
Of course. But the moment I mentioned anything with the past, in this particular case, he wouldn't have any of it. He left, didn't come back to me.
Wow, Max, you are amazing. You are so positive. What you've gone through, and to be, to have looked at life. You are the example of somebody who has looked at in the positive way.
Look, but I comparatively, I compare myself to my generation.
Yeah.
I had a soft landing in England. I had a family that looked after me. I liked them. They liked me. They gave me the right sort of education. In spite of all the troubles, they kept in touch with me after I left on Hachshara. We were in touch all the time. The lady that took ill came back, became healthy, of course. We corresponded until her death. She was buried here, and I was the main speaker at her death.
And they've had a few reunions, international reunions, and reunions here in Israel as well.
Yes.
Have you attended any of the main reunions?
Only one. I didn't care for all this Kindertransport business. Kindertransport had a big reunion in London in the end of some time ago, 20 years ago, whatever. It didn't interest me. But when they had a reunion of Hachsharot and of this particular farm in Kibbutz Lavi, then of course I went. That interested me. Yeah.
Well, Max, I cannot thank you enough.
Not at all.
You are an inspiration, really. You are so positive and always smiling, and it's just it's something. I tell you, you are such an example. Somebody to have gone through such a trauma and such an adversity, and to have taken life and to move it in such a positive direction.
I had some help.
It's wonderful. Anyway, I really want to thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
And at my best room, and you should just have mazel and nachas from all your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
Thank you.
Tell me just something else to me.
And there are some items like...
The 2 candlesticks are from your home in
my home in Berlin.
In Berlin.
And I think the wedding presents of my parents. I think.
Wow.
I think the things like this, the little items like that, which are part of the things that were sent to me. Stuck into clothes, in those 2 big trunks that I got. Just put a bit of silver here and a stamp. I want to show you the stamp collection.
Thank you. It's such a great honor and a privilege to meet you and to hear your really inspiring and wonderful story about the Kindertransport. You're so positive, and it's just been so enlightening. It's just unbelievable.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I hope other people will have a better time altogether.
Thank you so much, Max. Thank you. And I really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome.